Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, Burnout and Alcohol Coach and Wellness Expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hello, everybody. I am back with another episode of Ask the Coach. Now, today I'm actually responding to a request to talk about a topic. So Miranda wrote into me and said, "Hi, Wendy, would you consider doing an episode entirely on meditation? Everything from how to, what kinds of meditation there are, where to get the tools from, etc. I would love to know more. Thank you." So I thought, why not do an episode on meditation? This is something that's been on my list of topics to do for a while, and I haven't had any experts on to talk about it. I want to start by saying very clearly that I am not an expert in relation to meditation. It is something that I have been doing myself now for several years. I've done lots of research on it. I've read lots of things about meditation, but by no means do I consider myself to be an expert on meditation. There are lots of people out there who are experts, and I would love to have somebody on this podcast at some point who is considered an expert to talk about meditation and mindfulness. But that said, this is an area of balance that I do coaching around. I do suggest that my clients who are overwhelmed and stressed and anxious or struggling with things like sleep, that they actually explore meditation and mindfulness and start trying to practice that more often in their own real lives. So this is something that I do talk about all the time, even though I'm not an expert. And I thought I would share my limited knowledge on meditation and mindfulness with you guys today, hopefully in a way that dispels all the myths that I think are out there around meditation and what it is and what's required, and also some of the stigma that might be associated with it, and just do what I think I do best, which is put it out there in easy to understand terms with some really simple practical suggestions on how to get started. So thank you very much for the topic suggestion, Miranda. This one is for you. So let's talk about meditation. What is it and what is it not? I think it's almost easier to start with what is it not. But before we get into that, meditation is one form of mindfulness. So we often use those terms interchangeably, but they're not really interchangeable. There are lots of ways to be mindful that don't involve actual meditation. And some of the suggestions I'm going to give today for ways to start getting into meditation may technically fall more into the category of mindfulness than meditation. I'm okay with that. As I said, I'm not an expert. This is just all about making small improvements and, finding a place to start that you can build from. So meditation is not a spiritual practice all the time. So this is one of the common pushback points that I get from clients when I start talking about meditation, is they think that somehow it needs to involve some form of spirituality or, getting yourself to some higher level of consciousness. And that's really not what I'm talking about when I'm introducing the topic of meditation to my clients. I'm just keeping it really simple and practical, and we're taking that out of the equation. There are certainly religions and spiritual practices out there that incorporate meditation as part of their practice, but meditation does not need to have a spiritual component. The second biggest myth that I hear, or pushback that I get around starting a meditation practice, is that I need to be able to turn my brain off, and I can't do that. My brain is way too busy for meditation. I've tried it and I cannot stop thinking. I want to be really clear on this. The purpose of meditation is not to stop thinking. It is not to turn your thoughts off. Nobody can do that. Human beings are simply not capable of that. We have far too many thoughts. Depending on what research you look at, I've seen statistics that would suggest that we have between 30,000 and 120,000 thoughts a day. I mean, even if we go with the low end of that, 30,000 thoughts, that's a ton of thoughts. And, it probably falls more in the middle for most of us every day. We are having thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of thoughts every single day. Our brain is always thinking about something. It's impossible to turn our brains off. And the purpose of meditation is not to do that. So if you're somebody who's been resisting this because you feel like, oh, my brain is too busy, I can't do that, I'm always thinking, I can't shut my brain off, I would say to you, Don't worry about that. You're just human. You're like everybody else. You're not special. And actually, the fact that you feel that way is probably just another piece of evidence that supports why you should start trying to meditate. So the second myth around meditation that I hear is that you need to be able to shut your brain off, and you can't do that because your brain's too busy. That is just a myth. That is not the point of meditation. I'm going to talk about what the purpose of meditation is as I understand it in a minute. Excuse me. So those are the first two myths. The third thing I hear from people all the time is just, I don't have time for it. My life is way too busy. I do not have time to meditate. Now, there is a saying, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it's something like, if you can't find 10 minutes to meditate, then you need to meditate for an hour. And that's because meditation is actually a tool that helps. It helps in so many ways, which we're going to talk about as I continue on in this podcast. But one of the things that meditation has been proven to do is to increase productivity. So if you're somebody who doesn't feel like they have the time to meditate, meditation can actually help you create more time. It does not need to take very long. When I start working with burnout clients or with clients who are just trying to increase their, daily joy, or people who are struggling with unhealthy coping mechanisms like food or alcohol, and we start talking about meditation, I usually suggest they start with 5 minutes most days. It does not need to take an hour. You do not need to roll out a yoga mat. You don't need to chant. You don't need to be saying Om. You don't need to be assuming the pose that you guys are all imagining right now in your head where you have your fingers pinched together and your legs crossed. That does not need to happen in meditation. You just need 5 minutes a day. And that is really a fantastic starting place. So if you're listening to this podcast and by the time I'm done, you're thinking to yourself, maybe I should try that. That might be worth a shot. Just start with 5 minutes most days. And listen, it's like everything else. The more you do it, the easier it's going to be for you to remember to do it, right? As with all the other habits I talk about, most of the time when you're starting out with something, it's the first time you've done it. So it's not a natural pathway for your brain to get on. It's one that you have to create. And again, remember with those neural pathways, the more times you take that neural pathway, you do the thing that causes those particular neurons to fire together, the stronger that pathway gets, the easier it gets for your brain to find, which means the easier it gets for you to do the thing. So in the beginning with meditation, I'm going to suggest what I suggest with all new habits. Set up some reminders for yourself. Set yourself up for success. Put a little note somewhere that you're going to see it to remind you to meditate. Put a reminder on your phone that dings halfway through the day that just reminds you it's time to meditate. Maybe set up a little corner that is your little spot where you sit in a comfy chair and you do your meditation, like something that you're going to see every day that's going to remind you to do it. The more you do it, though, the easier it's going to be for you to remember to do it. Also, I think you're really going to enjoy it. And so you're going to find that you want to do it and you miss it when you haven't been doing it regularly. So again, just to summarize, the 3 things you probably think about meditation are not true. The number one thing is that it is some kind of spiritual or religious practice. It's not. It doesn't need to be. It can be, but it certainly does not need to be. Second of all, you need to be able to turn your brain off or stop thinking, and you just can't do that because your brain's too busy. That's irrelevant, by the way. The third thing is it takes too long, and you don't have the time for it. 5 minutes a day, guys. And for any of you out there who are thinking to yourself, I don't have 5 minutes a day, I'm going to say to you, if you don't have 5 minutes a day for positive self-care, it's time to stop and to actually examine what's going on, because that is not healthy. I know you can find 5 minutes a day. I talk a lot about how to carve out time. I'll probably do a podcast episode on that topic on its own. For busy people, how do I find the time for these self-care activities? I'm going to tell you the first place to start, if you're thinking I don't have time to meditate, is to take a long, hard look at how much time you're spending on social media, because it is probably a lot of time. Go and look at your phone, check the usage information on apps. All phones will be able to give you that, and you'll probably be quite shocked at how much time you're spending on social media over the course of the day. Then set some limits on social media. You can do that in your phone as well. Put some limits on your apps so that you can only access them during certain hours, and you'll be amazed at how much time you free up from that. You will definitely be able to free up 5 minutes a day for a simple meditation practice. So let's talk about meditation and what it is first of all, maybe, and then we can talk a little bit about how it works and what the benefits are of it. So The first thing I would say is that there are many, many different ways to meditate. And again, I'm not an expert on this. I can tell you where I started, and I can tell you where lots of my clients start with meditation. The simplest way I think to describe meditation is that it's the act of sitting, usually quietly, and focusing on an anchor. So that is something that's happening in the moment that you're in, and doing your best to stay focused on that anchor. And when you find yourself thinking about things, which you will, that are not actually happening in the present moment, you push those thoughts away and you pull yourself back to that anchor. That's really the simplest way I can explain it. And that anchor can be all kinds of different things. So the anchor can be as simple as your breath. For many people, listening to and feeling the breath coming in and out of their body, maybe quietly counting the breaths, that can serve as an anchor. And when you're sitting there and you're feeling the breaths come in and out of your body, and then you find yourself thinking, oh my gosh, I forgot to put milk on the grocery list, you recognize that you're having a thought. As soon as you have the thought, ooh, I'm not really meditating right now, I'm thinking about something else. First of all, you are meditating. That's just part of meditation. But the second thing that you want to do is then remind yourself to come back to that anchor. So just refocus in on the breath in that situation. And you could do that for 5 minutes. I prefer to use something other than my breath as an anchor. I like to listen to a quiet soundtrack of some sort. It might be a soundtrack of waves, in the ocean. It might be a really peaceful piece of music without any lyrics that's not really distracting, but is something that I can kind of come back to. A lot of the time I use nature soundtracks, so it might be, a babbling brook and some birds or something like that. I'm going to tell you where you can find some of these things. There are lots of apps out there that provide you with these soundtracks that you can use as anchors. I like to use that and just focus in on what it is I am actually listening to. And use that as my anchor and come back to that when I find myself having thoughts. Now, a lot of people will say to me, I don't think this is working, Wendy. I'm doing this thing, and all I'm doing the entire time is thinking about other stuff. To which I would say, welcome to humankind, because this happens to everybody when they're trying to meditate. I remember one time planning an entire trip to Cuba during a meditation session. I don't think, focus on the anchor at all during the entire session. And when the little bell rang that I had set on my timer to let me know that I was done, I realized, oh my gosh, I just thought about Cuba the entire time. So listen, that's going to happen. And even in the times when that happens, I always say to my clients, it's still valuable time. It's still a valuable exercise because you set aside 10 minutes for yourself. And the very act of doing that is just reminding your brain and your body of the fact that you care about it and that self-care is actually a priority for you. So I think there's always value in it, even if it doesn't feel like you spend a lot of time focused on the anchor. The other thing I want to say, though, is that the purpose of meditation is to strengthen your brain. It's to get your brain getting better and better at noticing the thoughts when you have them. So you have to have the thoughts in order to notice them. So having the thoughts is just part of the process. It's not something that you should feel badly about. It's actually an integral part of the process and something of value. So when you have the thought and you think to yourself, thinking, and you pull yourself back to whatever the anchor is that you're using in that meditation session, you're strengthening your brain. You are, over time with meditation, teaching your brain to spend more time in the present moment and less time either off in the future, which is that predictive state. I've talked about this before. Future thinking is often anxiety-based thinking. It's predictive thinking. We're trying to figure out what's going to happen next. How's this going to go? What if this happens? Or you might be spending time in the past, so reliving past events, which very often has a component of regret to it. So you're thinking, oh, I should have done this differently. What we want to do is get better and better at spending our time in the present moment as opposed to in the past or in the future. And there are so many reasons for that. Most of the benefits of meditation come from our ability to do that. But just the simplest one for me is to try to convince you guys to give this a try is that it is in the present moment that all the good stuff happens. Everything good happens in the moment that you're in. Every little tiny spark of joy happens from something that is going on right now, not from something that may happen down the road or from something that already happened. And so getting better at being present in your life and actually being in the moment that you're in more often is absolutely key when it comes to feeling more joy. And that is my goal for everyone I work with. And that is my goal for every one of you as listeners, is to help you increase your daily joy. Meditation is such a helpful tool when it comes to doing that. So I talked about a couple of anchors. I talked about using your breath as an anchor. I talked about using some kind of a nature soundtrack, or, obviously you don't need a soundtrack if you're actually sitting by the beach. If you're lucky enough to be by a beach, you can just listen to the waves. You can also meditate with your eyes open and actually watch something. I have a client who likes to get mindful and do some basic meditation by watching the flames in a gas fireplace. And I have meditated myself watching waves roll in on a beach. When I've been on vacation, I love to sit and watch a wave come in from offshore and, gain strength and power and then break on the beach, and I watch it roll all the way down the beach, and then I go and I watch the next one come in. So it's just something that causes you to be focused on what's actually happening in the present moment. It can be visual, it can be auditory. Another auditory tool that many people find very helpful in meditation, especially when they're getting started, is guided meditation. And that is where someone's actually guiding you through the meditation. So you're listening to a voice and somebody is telling you what to do. Now, again, I'm going to talk about some apps and tools that are available if you're interested in trying out some meditation. And those apps and tools will all involve the option of guided meditation, which can be really helpful. I personally find it annoying to listen to someone's voice. So for me, guided meditation is not the right way to go. Now, with this, I'm going to say what I say about everything. You need to experiment and find the method that works the best for you. What actually feels pleasurable and enjoyable for you, as opposed to just creating more stress. For me, listening to someone talk in my ear is more stressful. I don't enjoy it. But I find it incredibly peaceful and relaxing to focus in on the sound of waves crashing on a beach, or a brook babbling, or sometimes just my own breath, just feeling my breath come in and out of my body. So again, what's right for me is not right for everybody else. You're going to need to go and try some different things. And I'm just talking about very basic meditation here. There is so much out there in terms of there are different schools of meditation, different styles and types of meditation that people, get into and really, really love. I know lots of people who love transcendental meditation, TM it's called. And again, as I would suggest, you just start with something really simple. And if you enjoy it and you want to explore it more, do some more research and try other things until you find the thing that really fits and works for you. You're also going to have to play around with what time of day works best for you, probably. As with everything, I always suggest you try to find a time of day where it is most likely going to happen. So set yourself up for success with it. And generally speaking, for most people, you're more likely to get the newer, harder things done if you bottom load your day. So if you put them in at the bottom of your day, because that's when you have the most willpower. I've talked about this before on this podcast. Willpower is a finite resource. We only have so much of it. So, we wake up in the morning and it's like we have a little bank account full of willpower. And as we go through our day and we make various decisions, we use up that willpower so that by the end of the day, we have very little left. So when you leave things like meditation, a brand new habit, to the end of the day, or exercise, it can be really tricky to actually get those things done, because if you're relying on willpower, which we very often are in the beginning, it's a factor in the beginning when we are trying to make change almost all of the time, it's just not there for you at night. You can't really rely on it. So you might want to start with meditation first thing in the morning, or right after you have your cup of coffee or whatever. Work it into your morning routine, at least in the beginning, to get it going. Now, it might be that your mornings are insane and you don't have time for that, but you do always take a half an hour lunch break. And if you take a half an hour lunch break, maybe that's the time to work it in. Again, it's what works for me isn't going to work for you, and you're going to have to find your own personal system when it comes to this new habit. So we've talked about the myths around meditation. We've talked just very basically around how meditation works. Again, it's just the practice of noticing thoughts that are not thoughts related to what's going on in the present moment. And when you have those thoughts, and notice them, you then pull yourself back to whatever you're using as an anchor in that moment. And you just keep repeating that process. And as you do that, you're exercising your brain, and you're getting better and better at noticing when you're not in the present moment, noticing when you're having those thoughts. And in turn, you're getting better and better at coming back to the present moment faster. That's all meditation is. You will have a million thoughts. It is okay. In fact, it's crucial to strengthening your brain to have the thoughts and to get better and better at noticing them. So don't beat yourself up about it. If your meditation sessions feel like, you're thinking about everything except for the fact that you're supposed to be meditating in that moment, that is okay. Eventually you will find that it gets easier and easier. But I will say this, I still have days where I just can't seem to get grounded and focused, and it's a bit frantic for me. But I do always feel better afterwards, just because I have taken, again, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, however long it is I'm taking, to sit quietly. And that in itself is enough to kind of slow my heart rate down and usually pull me out of fight or flight if I've been feeling really stressed out. So those are the basics around meditation. Now, a couple little tips around this. I talked about like putting it into a part of your day when it feels like you can actually do it, and it's more likely to happen. I also think with meditation, it's pretty important to make sure that you're comfortable. So you want to make sure you're sitting somewhere where you're comfortable. And I do recommend sitting and not lying down. The problem with lying down is that if you're tired, you will very often go to sleep when you meditate or try to meditate, which is a great thing at night. So if you're having trouble falling asleep, use this. By all means, use these tools to help you get into sleep. But if the goal of your meditation is to get better at being present, then that's not going to be happening for you if you're using meditation when you're lying down and you're often falling asleep during the meditation. You're not going to be serving that goal. So what I would suggest you do is find a comfortable place to sit. Now, you don't need to sit cross-legged. You don't need none of that. You just want to sit, with somewhat upright posture, I think, in a comfortable way, in a comfortable place. And that's really all you need. Again, you don't need anything fancy for this. You just need a place to sit that's comfortable. I have meditated in airports, on airplanes. I regularly have my earbuds in, and I will just close my eyes and just take a few minutes to try to focus in on the moment that I'm in. Okay, and then I want to talk a little bit about what meditation actually does for us and why this is worth trying, and why this is kind of, I have this base set of habits that I teach almost everybody that I work with in my private coaching practice and also in my groups, and meditation is one of them. I suggest this to almost everybody because it is something that, along with gratitude, has really changed my life. I did a podcast episode on gratitude a while ago. If you haven't listened to that yet, I really recommend you go and listen to that one if you're enjoying this discussion around meditation, because I think the gratitude piece ties in really nicely with this. One of the things I talked about in that podcast is that something that gratitude does is it does train your brain to be in the present moment more often. And meditation does exactly the same thing. And the reason why I started dabbling in gratitude is because I had already started meditating, and I had done a lot of research around meditation, and I realized this is pretty solid. There's a lot of research out there. It makes it really clear that there are some significant benefits to meditation. And I thought this might really help me in achieving some of my other goals. At the time, one of those goals was to become alcohol free. And I do credit meditation. I think it was a big piece of my ability to get where I wanted to get to with my relationship with alcohol, and find that, freedom where alcohol was really small and irrelevant, and I can take it or leave it now. Meditation was a big part of that. So was gratitude. So both of them together played in there. So what is it that meditation does? Well, as I said, it trains your brain to be in the present moment more often. Now, you're doing that initially in those sessions. So when you're sitting quietly, actually in the act of meditating, you are getting better at being in the moment that you're in. But eventually what happens is you start to notice that spills out over the meditation session into other hours of your day. So it just starts to feel like you're in the present moment more often. You're spending less time off in the future or in the past, which is really, really great. Again, because in the present moment, that's where all the good stuff happens. And if we're linking this with gratitude, in the gratitude session, I talked about how gratitude is all about noticing the really little things that happen during the course of the day that make you feel good and bring you joy. And the only way to notice those things is to be present. So meditation helps you with a gratitude practice. And I think gratitude practice probably helps you with the meditation. I think they probably both feed off of each other. So the very first thing that happens with meditation that is just a huge benefit is that you get better at being in the present moment, which means you have a better shot of noticing the great stuff that's happening around you, which means you have a better shot at more joy. And again, what is this all about if it's not about that? What is life all about if it's not about just having great days? And I'm telling you, we can't rely on these big things like weddings and graduations and promotions and new houses and vacations. We can't be relying on those as our sources of joy because they're just too few and far between, and they're fleeting when they happen. Instead, what we want to do is we want to create almost like a fountain of joy, which never runs out from all of the little things that are happening every single day all around us. And the only way to notice those things is to get better at being present. So that's the biggest benefit of meditation in my book. But there are tons of other benefits. So one thing that happens is something that I've heard described as the golden pause. I don't know who said that, but I heard it somewhere along the way. And I thought that's the perfect way to describe this phenomenon that I noticed has happened since I've started meditating. And the golden pause is really just like, you almost get like an extra few beats before you respond or react to things. It's like your brain just takes a beat. It just takes a step back before you respond. So that has been critically important to me when it comes to, in particular for me, parenting my teenagers. I feel like since I started meditating, I've gotten much less reactive. Now, I am not perfect. I still yell all the time, you guys, but I yell a lot, yes, less than I used to. And so this is one of the strategies that I would say has really helped with that. And I attribute it to this kind of golden pause effect that happens when you have been practicing meditation for a while. You just notice that they're just a little bit slower on the reaction curve, which is a really good thing. I'm talking about in a positive way here. You just have a second to think to yourself, wait a second, do I really want to yell here? Do I want to react and respond in this way? Is there a better way to react? And then for me, I start using some of the questions that I use in coaching all the time. I'm more likely to use those because I have a minute, it's not a full minute, it's probably literally a second of a pause, but I have time to say, could I care less? Like, is this worth reacting to? Or, will this matter in 5 years? Another one that I like to use. I feel like the golden pause gives me the ability to actually ask those questions more often, which leads to me reacting less often, which frankly ups my joy because my days are way better when I don't yell, and I'm sure yours are too. So the golden pause is another thing that I love about meditation, and I would love to hear from you guys if you have been doing meditating for a while and you've noticed this. Let me know. Send me an email or drop me a message through social media. Because I don't think I'm alone in this. I've certainly heard from my clients that they notice that this happens after a period of time of meditating. Now, there are so many specific benefits of meditation, you guys. I can't even list them all, but I just want to give you guys a few just to motivate you to maybe try this thing out. We know that meditation has a positive impact on sleep. So for my clients who are struggling with sleep, which is so many of the busy perimenopausal or menopausal women who are listening to this podcast, your sleep is elusive. It is not solid and reliable like it once was. You might be finding that you're having trouble getting to sleep, or that you are waking up and having trouble getting back to sleep. Maybe you have like racing brain in the middle of the night. If any of that stuff is happening, meditation can help. So that's great. We also know that meditation helps to increase productivity. I talked about that at the beginning of the podcast. This is why so many powerful, important people, busy people, are meditating regularly. I don't know if any of you have watched Billions. I think it's on Showtime, but we started watching that over the course of the pandemic. And one thing I noticed in Billions, which is all about billionaires and really successful people, it's a fiction drama, but very good, by the way. The first couple seasons are very good. Anyway, what I noticed as I was watching it is that they've got meditation and mindfulness worked in through the entire show. So you see these really successful, at least objectively successful people in terms of from a business perspective and a wealth perspective. You see them using meditation. There's a meditation room, for example, in the trading office, and you just see examples of this throughout the show, which I thought was fascinating. But if you go and research, like, people who meditate, famous people who meditate, you're gonna see that this is something that so many people are doing regularly because of the impacts that it has on focus and productivity and other things, I'm sure, but definitely focus and productivity. It's big in the business world for that. We also know that meditation is incredibly powerful when it comes to depression and managing anxiety. I actually read a study, which I can't quote you exactly here because I don't have it in front of me, but that talked about how regular practice of meditation can be as impactful on depression as an entry-level SSRI drug. So SSRI drugs, this is a typical drug that somebody would be put on when they are diagnosed with depression. So that's a pretty powerful piece of information. Meditation, and I'm not suggesting don't take the medications that you've been prescribed, please. I want to be clear about that. Follow your doctor's recommendations on that. But this as a parallel practice can be very, very helpful for people who are struggling with anxiety and depression. Why does it work? Well, because it pulls you back to the present moment. You get better and better at being at the moment, in the moment that you're in. And remember, anxiety is a future-based state. It is the state of worrying about what might happen. That is the definition of anxiety. And so if you're constantly in that anxious state, that means that you're spending a lot of your time in the future and not in the present moment. So the better you get at pulling your brain back into the present moment, the easier it is to manage anxiety because you're not in that future predictive thinking state as much of the time, if that makes sense. So I can see logically how there is this connection between management of anxiety and a regular practice of meditation. We also know that from a physical perspective, so it's obviously very impactful from a mental health perspective, it's also very helpful physically for people. So there is research out there to indicate that medication is an effective way to manage blood pressure. Again, I want to be really clear. I'm not giving health advice here. Follow the advice of your treating practitioner on all of this stuff. But meditation can be really helpful practice when it comes to managing blood pressure. And we also know that it helps to bring down cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And that's the hormone that I'm focused on the most in the work that I do as a burnout and balance coach and also as an alcohol coach, is in helping people manage stress and anxiety. Because that's one of the things that leads very often to an overuse of unhealthy coping mechanisms like food and alcohol. And so your cortisol is one of your stress hormones. And when it gets elevated and remains elevated for too long, it can lead to all kinds of problems. And I've talked about that in previous burnout podcasts. If you're interested in that, go back and listen to some of the podcasts with Dr. Sarah Bailey, where we talk about burnout. So the fact that a regular practice of meditation can help to bring your cortisol levels down can be really, really helpful for people who are chronically stressed or in burnout or trying to prevent burnout or trying to recover from burnout. And we know that meditation helps to bring cortisol down. Why does it have that impact? Because you're sitting quietly, and a lot of the time you're actually focusing on your breathing, and whatever you're listening to is probably pretty relaxing. And what happens in that moment is that your breathing pattern starts to shift into a deeper, slower breathing pattern, which basically signals to your brain everything is okay. You're no longer in danger. You're not being chased by the saber-toothed tiger anymore. It is okay to move out of fight or flight and into the relaxation response. And what happens after that is that your cortisol levels, your stress hormones, start to come down. So you can see there are so many benefits to meditation, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I could go on about it for forever, but I just picked some of my kind of favorite ones. There's also a study out there around binge eating that's interesting, around a regular practice of meditation and the impact that has on binge eating episodes for binge eaters. And it had a significant impact on decreasing the weekly episodes of binging, which is, I think, also really powerful and probably translates also into other unhealthy coping mechanisms. So where do you get the tools to get started for this? Honestly, you just go to the apps. That's where I would suggest you start. If you're interested in this, go and download one of the many apps out there. There are free versions of almost all of these apps. Some of them have upgrades to a paid version. I would suggest you dabble in the free app first and then make a decision as to whether you want to upgrade to paid. Even the paid apps aren't that expensive, totally worth it in terms of the benefits of this, in my opinion. I would start with Calm. It's one of my favorite ones, CALM. It's a great, very accessible mainstream approach to mindfulness and meditation. Can give you some really great places to start, especially if you're feeling kind of skeptical about it or you're worried it's a little bit too woo-woo. I think you'll find that Calm is very accessible. Headspace is another popular meditation and mindfulness app. 10% Happier is another popular app. There's one called Buddhify. I mean, there are so many of them out there. You can kind of try a bunch of them and see which one works for you. Calm, as I said, is the one that I normally recommend my clients start with. You can level up. There are lots of online courses available around meditation that you can take, courses around mindfulness and meditation. And then, of course, once we get out of this pandemic social distancing situation that we're in, there are also in-person courses and workshops that you can take that can give you more grounding in this technique. But it doesn't need to be fancy and it doesn't need to take forever. It really, I think, is most effective when it's something that you enjoy, that feels good to you, and that fits into your day. So start with 5 minutes a day, see how it goes, play around and experiment with the different types of anchors and ways to maybe, try this out and find something that feels good to you. And then, as with everything else, repetition is a piece of it, you guys. We know positive emotion is really important when it comes to solidifying habits. So we want to make sure that you feel good about it and that it's, it's something that you actually enjoy. That will make it far more likely that it actually turns into a habit. But you also just need to do it, day after day. So again, set yourself up for success. Reminders, Post-it notes, alarms, whatever is going to make it more likely that you actually do it. And don't be too hard on yourself if you forget. You're going to forget some days. That's okay. Just get right back on and do it as soon as you remember to do it. And the more days that you do it, the more times you walk that new neural pathway, the more likely that this will actually become an established habit. So that is Meditation 101 from a non-expert who used to be quite the skeptic, who has now 100% bought into this practice. And I'll tell you, if I don't do it for a few days, I really miss it now. I'll just get this feeling like I just want 10 minutes of quiet. And I think that that's a sign that this has now become a habit for me and something that I truly enjoy. So I hope that helps, Miranda. Thank you for sending in the topic suggestion. And I'm always open to topics. So if there's something that you would love for me to talk about on the show, or if there is a guest that you would like to see on the show, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free to send me an email or a message through social media. I would love to hear from you. Have a great day, everyone.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a burnout and alcohol coach, I help busy women like you find freedom from alcohol. If you're ready to start exploring your relationship with alcohol, I've got lots of options for you, including private and group coaching programs. Find out more on my website. Go to www.wendymccallum.com and click on the Freedom from Alcohol tab. That's www.wendymccallum.com. To be sure you don't miss any upcoming bite-sized conversations, subscribe now to this podcast.